Hitler's secret agenda had long been to attack Russia. Now he was ready. To lull Stalin into a false sense of security, Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union in June 1939. The two most powerful dictators in the world became allies. On the morning of June the 22nd, 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Russia. It was intended to fulfill two of Hitler's goals, the destruction of communism and the annihilation of the Jews. The invasion stunned Stalin, and not surprisingly, he felt personally betrayed.
It was a total surprise to Stalin, and he was very disoriented as a result, and for the next several weeks he went into a kind of nervous breakdown, and people had difficulty contacting him, getting him to understand what was happening. And it wasn't for about 3 or 4 weeks that he finally pulled himself together and started acting like the man he was supposed to be.
For the paper today, all are eager to read the speech of Stalin. Stalin calls upon the Soviet people to grapple in deadly conflict with its most vicious, most treacherous enemy.
In late 1941, Operation Barbarossa appeared to be a great success. Hitler was jubilant. But Providence did not favor the Führer, and ironically, the beginning of the end came 15 months later in the city named after his Soviet opponent. The Battle of Stalingrad was more than just a military operation. It was a symbolic showdown between two men of iron. In September 1942, the Germans launched an all-out land and air attack on the city. Stalin issued an order. Any soldier that surrendered would be considered a traitor. Retreating soldiers were shot.
If they were commanding officers, the family members should be subject to repression. As it turned out, he himself had a family member who was an officer, and this was his son Yakov.
Stalin's son Yakov was taken prisoner by the Germans.
At one point, the Germans may have thought they could offer to exchange Yakov for some high-level German officers who had been taken prisoner by the Russians. And some kind of a offer was made, to which Stalin is believed to have said, "I have no son named Yakov."
The Russians held on and launched a massive counterattack of 1 million men encircling the German Sixth Army. After its defeat at Stalingrad in 1943, the German army never recovered on the Eastern Front. But even though Hitler was losing the war, he was still determined to exterminate the Jews.
When things were hanging precariously in the balance on the Eastern Front, Hitler, given the choice between allocating troops and trains to reinforce the German armies fighting off the assault of Stalin's Red Army and allocating those troops and trains to carrying Jews to the death camps, Hitler withdrew troops and trains from the Eastern Front in order to more swiftly and efficiently carry out the murder of the Jews.
But by now, in 1943, Hitler was a very sick man. After Stalingrad, Hitler became increasingly dependent on amphetamines. Each morning, his personal physician, Dr. Theodor Morell, gave him an injection. Throughout the day, Hitler treated himself with oral amphetamines. At night, he took barbiturates to sleep. As the war went on, the Führer became more and more dependent on Dr. Morell. New information obtained from Hitler's medical records revealed that he showed signs of drug toxicity, affecting his judgment. He became increasingly paranoid. Toward the end of the war, Hitler began to show symptoms of Parkinson's disease.
Wenn man täglich mit zusammen ist, dann fällt das nicht so auf.
He trembled slightly, but if you are with someone every day, you don't notice this. And no one paid attention to every detail.
As the Red Army overwhelmed Berlin, Hitler was hiding deep inside the Führer bunker beneath the Chancellery. When Russian soldiers entered the bunker, they found several Nazi corpses in the courtyard with the charred bodies of Eva Braun and Hitler. Inside, on the Führer's desk, the Russians found a folder with 42 of Hitler's paintings of pastoral Austria and an album of prized snapshots. Inside, a photo Hitler had been carrying with him all his life. His mother, Clara. Stalin, the final victor, exploited his triumph over the Nazis by parading long lines of Nazi war prisoners through Red Square to rally the Soviet people. Many hoped a new era of peace and freedom was on the horizon.
I remember I, at the time, was an attaché of the American Embassy. And on May 9, 1945, the day the surrender took place, there was a great burst of rejoicing on the streets of Moscow. People were dancing, and I remember standing in a group in which one young officer, perhaps a major, said in Russian, "Now it's time to live."
But Stalin, as usual, needed enemies, not peace and freedom. The terror this time was directed against Jews and centered on a group of Jewish doctors. Stalin accused them of plotting to murder Soviet leaders, including himself.
The accused doctors were to be publicly executed on Red Square. And following that, the Jewish population of the major cities were to be deported to eastern Siberia, with pogroms perpetrated against him en route.
Only his sudden death of a brain hemorrhage on March the 5th, 1953, prevented him from carrying out yet another purge. His daughter, Svetlana, recalled the scene as she stood by his deathbed.
He suddenly opened his eyes and cast a glance over everyone in the room. It was a terrible glance. Then something incomprehensible and awesome happened. He suddenly lifted his left hand as though he were pointing to something above and bringing down a curse on all of us. The next moment, after a final effort, the spirit wrenched itself free of the flesh.
Hundreds of thousands of mourners watched as Stalin was laid to rest in the mausoleum beside Lenin. For Adolf Hitler, however, there was no monument, not even a marker. Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, two of the most ruthless and infamous dictators of the 20th century, each left a legacy of cruelty, terror, and death, which changed the course of history and resound to this day.